The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today, growth for the greater good, how capitalism can be a force for transformation of the clean economy. My guest today is my brother, Ty Montague. He is the co-CEO of Co-Collective and the author of a very good book called True Story, How to Combine Story and Action to Transform Your Business. Welcome to the show, Ty.
Oh, thanks for having me, Tim. It's great to be here.
I love talking and thinking about big picture stuff. And so we are going to explore some of your work and how we view the situation with capitalism in the United States and in the world, and how it can be a force for good. As we were saying in the pre-show, humans are not designed for the world that we live in today. We are designed for a world where it really pays to be greedy, because if you are not greedy, you go extinct. And now that's no longer the case. Life is a little easier. We have electricity, we have refrigerators, and so we have to be more thoughtful, though, and intentional. And you have, I think, stumbled upon that. We came to this same place via very different routes, but tell our listeners a little bit about how you came to realize that capitalism can be a force for good.
Yeah, so I began my career in the traditional advertising business. I worked in that business for a long time, helping companies essentially tell their story, mostly using paid media, 30 and 60-second television commercials. And that's a fun business. It's full of a lot of hooligans and weirdos. And I had a really good time in that business. But it, over the years, bothered me more and more that it was obviously possible for a company to tell one story, in other words, claim through their advertising that they stood for one thing, while at the same time actually taking actions that had them standing for something else. In other words, they were telling one story and doing another story. And I finally decided that if that was allowed to kind of continue, if companies were allowed to say that they stood for a better environment or a better society, or stood for some greater good, but really didn't, that I wasn't doing anything to help the world. In fact, I was making the world worse. And at the same time, as I was having these thoughts, I began to notice what seemed to me to be a different kind of a company that had a story that they were telling, but they weren't using traditional advertising or paid media to tell that story. They were conveying their belief system and their narrative through the actions that they took in the world. And I came to call these companies story doers as opposed to storytellers, because they conveyed their conviction about the world through the actions that they took. And there are now, I began making lists of these companies. There are now many of them. Many of your listeners will be familiar with them. Tesla is an example of a story doing company. And I found, as I made lists of them and kind of popped the hood on how these companies worked, I discovered that, beyond just being less dependent on paid media, which made them more efficient as businesses, they actually operate in a slightly different way. And so I decided to leave the traditional advertising business and start my own company, Co-Collective, about 10 years ago. And I wrote the book that you referenced. Thank you for mentioning True Story. And I wrote the book about this new kind of business. And I've spent the last 10 years at Co-Collective helping companies understand the principles of being a story doing company, and then helping them, in many cases, apply those principles and transform their business. And the key difference between a story doing company and a storytelling company is that a story doing company is on what I call a quest. They are on a mission to make some positive, either social or environmental change in the world. And they use that quest, is our term of art for it, to determine all of the actions that they take as a business, both internally and externally. And as a result, they are for-profit businesses, but they are trying to use the forces of capitalism to make, positive change in the world. And we're just seeing more and more of these kinds of companies popping up. They're getting more and more successful, and it feels like we're on the cusp of a real revolution. And I use that word advisedly. It's not a word I throw around, but capitalism itself now, it seems, is beginning to change. It's beginning to become essentially mandatory to be a purpose-led company, to make a connection with the next generation of young, kind of woke, activist consumers.
Excellent. So I want to set the table a little more here. And I'm glad you mentioned Tesla, because Elon Musk is my favorite poster child for the CEO of the future. And one of the questions that we should toss around is, can these types of leaders be trained, or are they just born? Is it genetic, or is it social? Is it the environment, or is it both? Of course, it is probably a combination of both. And we are on the precipice of a genetic revolution where we might be cloning humans. And I say, let's clone Elon and Larry Fink and create small armies, because one guy is great, but we need thousands of great leaders in many places on Earth to tackle these challenges. But the other context that's relevant to my listeners is that we here in the clean energy industry often think, well, I'm greening the grid. My work is done, right? This is a very this is very important, and I think that it's not enough. So I think that we in the energy industry also have to look inward and find our purpose. Yes, the clean energy transition is part of the purpose of most of the companies in solar, wind, and storage, but it's deeper than that. And if you just go about the business of earning money, that's an easy business, basically, right? The forces, the economic forces at play here are so great. It's like a tide. There's a huge wave of money flowing into wind, solar, and storage now. And you could be the evilest entrepreneur on the planet and make a killing in energy, in the clean energy transition. And that's not going to do humanity a lot of good. So it's a both and. And so how do you challenge leaders who are very successful entrepreneurs, right, to go above and beyond their primary goal, which is to answer to their shareholders, and do something that's also really good for the future of humanity?
Right. Well, one of the interesting things about the difference between sort of a traditional company and, these companies that I call story-doing companies, is that story-doing companies, because they are purpose-led, in other words, they are not product-led, they are purpose-led. Their product is a result of pursuing their purpose, as opposed to the other way around. Because of that, they often defy categorization in some interesting ways. So let's take Tesla as an example. Tesla is on a quest, or their purpose is to accelerate the transition to a sustainable energy economy. A lot of people would describe Tesla even today as a car company. Tesla does not think of themselves as a car company. They happen to manufacture cars, but they also manufacture battery packs, Powerwall that you put inside your home to make your home more energy efficient. They're in the solar tile business in roofing. They're in grid level battery storage, and I'm certain that they will be in many more businesses in the future, because they don't think of themselves as a car company. They think of themselves as a company that is on a mission to accelerate the entire transition to a sustainable energy economy. And because of that, they enjoy a number of benefits. First of all, they don't have to advertise. They are constantly making announcements about iconic innovation in one or more of their businesses. They are interesting innately because they are pursuing this incredibly ambitious quest to upend essentially the entire hydrocarbon economy and usher in an entirely new energy economy. And each product announcement and each innovation that they put into the world is further proof that that is what they're trying to do as a business. And as a result, their brand is built on action as opposed to being built on exposition. They don't have to do Tesla car commercials. There's a pent-up desire on the part of consumers to buy Tesla's products to try to become a part of making this, incredibly necessary thing happen. And so if I were giving advice to, any of your listeners who are entrepreneurs, I would say a good question to ask yourself is, what business are you actually in? Because I would challenge you, if you're, for instance, in the business, if you think you're in the business of manufacturing solar panels, I would say that is your product, but that is not necessarily the business that you're in. Your business, you could be pursuing some kind of higher goal, something that is going to light people up, to excite them, to make them want to actually join you in this incredibly audacious thing that you're trying to do in the world. Another way to think about this is, often I will say your quest, whatever it is a great way of describing the business that you're in. So Tesla is in the business of accelerating the transition to a clean energy economy. That is the business that they're in. They will make whatever products they need to make in order to hasten that transition. They are not wedded to one particular vertical, and that attitude and that kind of building your brand through action is what people respond to. It is exciting to the next generation of consumers who look around the world and see that we're facing just this existential array of threats that that need to be addressed. And so it's like, rethink the way you think about your own business in order to light up the consumer of tomorrow, and you have a chance of building a much bigger and more successful business.
Yeah, I think we are at a point in the United States, certainly, where there is a large number of young people who now realize that they are potentially really effed by the world that you and me and our forebears have created.
Yeah.
And so they're pissed, but
Yeah.
they recognize that it's not enough to be angry, that you have to take action. And they're looking for something good to do in the world. And Elon has tapped into that. The graduating class of engineers want to go work for two companies, SpaceX and Tesla. They are
Yeah.
the 1 and 2. And Elon needs lots of engineers, and he has been very successful at, creating a vision. And he's also really transcended, no pun intended, the short game. The short game is, let's make a lot of money. The long game is, let's survive for another 100 million years. And to do that, you have to become interplanetary. And Elon schedules his life around, does it get me to Mars faster? And that's an extremely ambitious goal, but it is worth it is worth fighting for, because no matter what happens in the next 100 or 500 years here on Earth, we're going to become a sustainable society probably. But if the meteorite then hits and just knocks us cold, then what was the point, right? And so the odds of that happening are very, very high, just a question of when that's going to happen. And so you actually do have to leapfrog and become interplanetary, and more people need to start thinking that way, and that long-term thinking. I'm inspired by an organization called the Long Now Foundation that
Stewart
studies
Brand.
problems, right, on how to create technology that lasts for thousands or tens of thousands of years.
Yep.
We struggle to create things that last more than 100 years, say. A
Yep.
really good building will last a couple of 100 years or
Yep.
1,000 years, or, okay, in the case of the pyramids, 10,000 years. But so in that context, Ty, business leaders are under such pressure. And I don't trivialize this at all, right? Reporting to your stakeholders and guaranteeing your stakeholders that they're going to make money off of your leadership is a tremendous weight on their shoulders. But at the same token, they can be even more successful, I think is what you're saying, right? By being inspirational and being mission driven. Because it's going to get easier to sell products. You're going to get easier to recruit the best talent, and so that will snowball.
That's right.
So when you're pitching new business, though, I'm curious. I mean, you've worked with some very, very storied companies like Google and Under Armour, and when you're pitching new business, how do you frame this for teams in a way that gets traction?
Well, you said a bunch of important things, so I don't want to forget them, and I want to circle back to them. But I'll answer that. I'll start by answering that question. A lot of people think of. I think we've been trained by the kind of conventional thinking in business schools. Let's call it the Harvard Business School theory of the case, which is that we have to focus on maximizing short-term gain over and totally ignore long-term consequences, and shareholder value is the only goal that a CEO should be focused on. And that is just obviously wrong. We are now, for years people complained about it, but we're now seeing the actual tangible results of that way of thinking. We have multiple environmental crises. Fires burning out of control in California and Australia, bizarre weather events, accelerating mass extinction of species, weird crossover events because we're cutting down rainforests and we're encountering animal species that we never encountered before. So viruses are more quickly making the leap into humans, as well as then just the existential threat of, as you said, an asteroid hitting the Earth. And there's just, we live in a time that is fraught with peril. And if you're a young person and you're looking at this mess and you're saying, this is a thing that I am going to inherit, it is obvious that you want to do business as a young person with companies that are thinking long-term and thinking, this is a key phrase that you use, thinking about stakeholders rather than just merely shareholders. Shareholders are part of the group that you need to think about, but companies that are going to succeed with young consumers and companies that are going to be able to recruit the best talent in the future are the companies that are thinking long-term and about societal stakeholders as rather than thinking short-term and only about shareholders. And so what I say to my clients are, if you want to win the war for talent, if you want the best people to join your company, if you want to stay connected with the next generation of buyers, if you want people to buy your products in the future, this is not a nice to have. This is not corporate social responsibility. This is existential. This is hardcore business survival that you need to be focused on as a leader, and you need to define what your lane is to make a connection with the next generation of consumers. And to do that, you need to decide what are the big societal, social, or environmental problems that you are going to take on as a company. And you need to be able to prove to them that you're putting your money where your mouth is. In other words, that you are willing to forego short-term profitability for long-term gain. And that is hard, especially in a publicly traded company. But it is not unprecedented for leaders to push back on the traditional quarterly earnings. Larry Fink is on record now saying he thinks quarterly earning calls should be abolished and CEOs should resist engaging in them. Amazon as a company, Jeff Bezos as a leader, for years pushed back on investors who said, we want you to show profitability. And he was like, well, then don't invest in my company, because I'm going to reinvest every penny back into the business and focus on growing it. And if you want me to show profitability, take your money and go invest it someplace else. That to me is the difference between a leader and a CEO. A leader sets the tone and sets the bar, and great leaders today need to set the bar in a long-term place, not a short-term place.
It's so interesting to have Bezos and Musk juxtaposed, right? And I'm not a huge fan of Jeff Bezos. I'm a fan of Amazon. I have to give them credit. They have created a wonderful business model that is very successful and super convenient. And I really appreciate what they do.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they now have such influence in the world.
Power, yeah.
And the question for me is, well, hello, Ginger. The question for me is, can you take that and turn that in a very focused way as a force for the greater good? And it's a both and, right? Musk has to be focused on the next cheaper car, right? He has to produce a really killer $25,000 car. You and I are both Tesla owners, and it's a wonderful world to be part of, to lower your carbon footprint and be able to get around in such a great modern way using electricity and batteries. And eventually it'll be completely green and clean energy that is powering the Tesla, right? And that's the future.
Yeah.
But he also has to have this long-term vision for, it's not just about more and better cars, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I think Bezos falls down there. He is creating a space fair, he is creating Blue Origin. He's trying to go to space as well, like SpaceX. He's pretty far behind. But I don't see the vision the way I do with Musk.
No, I agree with that. Bezos feels more like a traditional CEO than Musk. But I would just say, one of the good things about Bezos is he has inculcated the entire culture at Amazon with a relentless focus on the customer. And ultimately what that means is customers have a lot of power at Amazon, and they have not been asking him for long-term thinking necessarily. What customers have been asking Amazon for heretofore is convenience, and almost magical levels of convenience, which Amazon, continues to pull rabbits out of hats from a logistics standpoint to provide that for customers. But the next generation of customers is going to make different demands. And it's interesting to see, company like Amazon versus a company like Walmart. We were talking about this in the pre-show. I think Walmart is a company that is waking up to the fact that they can use their power in, their muscle in kind of logistics the power of their system of distribution to make really positive changes in the supply chain of all of the companies that they do business with, by forcing companies to rethink the packaging that they use, in some cases to rethink the ingredients in those products. And the reality is Amazon has as much power as Walmart does or more. And if Amazon wakes up, and I believe they will, and begins to use their power for positive change, then they will stand a chance of doing business with the next generation of consumers who really care about stuff like that. If not, ironically, I think Walmart has a chance of actually beating Amazon. We'll see. Amazon is a little hard because they're also in multiple businesses. They are in that hard to describe realm. They've got revenue coming in from sources that Walmart just does not. But I do think people are waking up to the power of Amazon, and in both a good and a bad way. And I think they're going to begin to vote with their wallets.
Yeah, what's present for me is this is a energy industry analogy, right? We in society go through these transitions. We transitioned away from whale oil when we discovered fossil oil and learned how to tap that source. It was just so much richer in energy that we said, well, shine this. Whaling is dangerous and difficult, and we can just dig a hole in the ground and find energy. We're going to do that. And whaling didn't stop because we felt bad for the whales or we ran out of whales. It was just, this was a lot better, a lot easier, and a lot faster and cheaper. Boom. And that is kind of, I think, what Musk is potentially creating with this revolution of electric vehicles, is that it is going to be more efficient and cheaper to own an EV in 5 or 10 years. It's not yet, but we're approaching that tipping point, and the ICE engine car is going to be a thing of the past. It is going to go extinct. The writing is on the wall, and there's still many people that scoff at that, right? And say, oh, you're smoking some crack there, dude. I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And another great point. Like, I think look, it's great. There will always be people who are going to do a thing because they want to be nice to the whales, and I'm pro being nice to the whales. However, I think a viewpoint that fewer people would argue with is creating a sustainable future for human beings. Like, if you just set the whales off to one side and go, if you don't want to worry about the whales, fine, worry about yourself. If you and your children and your children's children are going to have any kind of a life, you need to start making these changes today. And I think that's what Musk has tapped into, is like, he's pro humanity. Like, he is trying to save the world, literally. And people are excited by that. He's also audacious. He's got a swagger to him that people find infectious. And back to one of the questions that you asked earlier on, like, are they born or are they made? I think obviously a Musk level person does not come along all that often. He's a polymath and a very unusually intelligent and capable human being. But I think he is training and inspiring the next generation of CEOs who are watching somebody who, just doesn't give an F about what anybody else thinks, right? He's got a vision, he is pursuing it, and he is gonna do that, essentially no matter what. And he's managed to do it with an incredibly high level of success. So, I don't know whether we'll have more Musks other than unless we figure out how to clone him, as you said. But I definitely think we're going to have more Musk-like leaders in the future, just because of the people getting excited and inspired by what he's up to.
Yep. So we have 8 minutes left, and I want to make the most of that time.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, what is important for entrepreneurs to grab onto, we've touched on some very good and tangible things here.
Yeah.
And you can't just be an Elon Musk, okay, right? But you can be all that you can be, and
Yeah.
you can hire people that are smarter than you and harder working than you, and everyone should strive to, do that. But what are the things that stand out for you that young people, middle-aged people, leaders, followers, what can people be doing to become part of this uh, transition, for lack of a better word? I'm not referring to the energy transition. I'm talking about the transition for humanity and for capitalism, really, to
Evolution of
start to,
capitalism.
yeah,
Yeah.
the transition for capitalism.
Yeah. Well, I think you're not going to be able to build any kind of a successful business if you don't have a product that solves a human problem, right? So I don't want anybody to take away from this that I don't think that it's important to think your product offering through at an incredible level of detail. As you said, Musk has, it's a both and situation. As an entrepreneur, you've got to find a way to do something innovative that solves a pressing human problem, first and foremost. But the ones that are really going to win, like if you really want to be a standout winner in the future, I believe you need to find a solution that solves, you need to find a product solution that solves a pressing human problem, but also solves one of these pressing societal or environmental issues. The sweet spot is when you get those two things lined up. So, another way to think about it is what, based on the human insight that you have discovered, the problem that you want to solve, like how would you describe the business that you want to be in beyond the first product that you make? Like what is the quest that you are on, and how would you articulate that quest in a way that not only inspires you but inspires future employees, that inspires future customers to join you? Another thing that I often challenge entrepreneurs to do is think through not only their quest, like what are they for, what is the positive change that they're trying to make in the world, but what is their enemy? What is the evil that they are trying to overcome? What is the dragon that they are getting out of bed to slay every day? Often, just at the level of humans and story, often I find, like when I think about my favorite stories, movies, books, plays, television programs, the quality of the story, the intensity with which I'm engaged by a story is often defined more by the antagonist, more by the bad guy in the movie than by the good guy. So an example would be Star Wars. Luke Skywalker, yeah, he's okay, interesting Jedi, cool. But Darth Vader, like it's in going up against Darth Vader that we really see what Luke Skywalker is made of, and that Luke Skywalker discovers what he's truly made of. And so in a business context, what's your Darth Vader? How would you define the enemy that you are trying to overcome? And it's generally not a competitor, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what is the idea that you are trying to banish from the world, or the belief system that you are trying to change. And if you can really define that sharply, that can be incredibly inspiring for you. It'll keep you going through the dark times as an entrepreneur, because all entrepreneurs face them. But it will also inspire your employees in the future. It will inspire your customers in the future.
Excellent. I like to think that, the dragon really for humanity is that the earth is finite.
Yeah.
We cannot just grow infinitely on a finite planet. And so we have to really mind how we are doing business, how we are creating the good life. I think it's totally possible for us to have a wonderful, good life. Now we've gotten into a precarious situation, right, where the ecosystem may collapse and take a large swath of humanity with it. Humans will survive that, not the way we live today, certainly. And so it's about creating a softer landing for the transition that we're going to go through. We have to go through a transition. It'll either be brutal and a collapse and chaotic, or it'll be like moving from ice to electric vehicle, and it could be really smooth and awesome.
And think about that, right? Like the stories we tell ourselves as a society are amazing and they really matter. And the story that we have been telling ourselves about capitalism and the future of capitalism in traditional business schools is that creating a sustainable future is about less. It's about less consumption. It's about less opportunity. It's about fewer jobs. It's about, you know, turning off the lights and not having as much stuff. And I just think nothing could be further from the truth. I think that's a bad story. And I think it's an inaccurate story. If you look at the amount of innovation happening in the energy sector alone as we make this transition, it's obvious that a sustainable future is about more. It's about more innovation. It's about more abundance. It's about more time left on the clock for us as a species. Like there's just much more abundance to a sustainable system for us as a species. We have to change our mindset. We have to change that story because that story is one of the things that holds us back.
That's a great place to stop. Before we give our listeners a way to reach you, I need to make a couple of announcements. You can find all of the Solar Podcast content at cesnrg.com/podcast. Here you see we're covering topics like solar economics, job creation with David Loomis, who's an economic expert, and he's written many reports on wind, solar, and storage projects and their economic impact. It's a gift for rural communities, especially. Things like grid interactive buildings, intelligent project siting, rooftop storage, so many good topics. So check it out. Please subscribe to the channel. Please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. Reach out to me. I love to hear from my listeners. What do you want to hear about? And if you have ideas for guests or want to be a guest yourself, please reach out to me. You can reach me at tmontague@cesnrg.com or on Twitter, tgmontague. Well, I want to thank my guest, Ty Montague, for coming on the show. Ty, how can our listeners reach you?
Thanks, Tim. At T Montague on Instagram, and that's mostly not businessy stuff. And LinkedIn is a great place to hit me with businessy stuff. I'm very happy to respond to inbound on that platform. And you can also just email me at tmontague@cocollective.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Ty, and let's grow solar and storage.